What I want to know is, do we take crowdfunding seriously? Because it's got in the way of a lot of things, and I think it's going to be an awful mess eventually. But
I would say it's a fairly new thing that's come along, and believe it or not, when we were looking for funding, I think it was just on the cusp of starting to come. I would fully agree with what Justin says. You know, the most valuable thing that we've had has been the skills and expertise that we didn't have that came with the money. It's the money. Actually, if we just had money, it was dumb money, we would probably spend it in not such a wise way.
Just very briefly, the two things that haven't been mentioned yet. One is the crowd can be beneficial because they become champions. So you've got a B2C, and breweries are the big one that gets mentioned a lot, or clothing, or something that's going to the consumer. You've got a whole stack of, even if they put £10 in, they're going to talk about to their friends down the pub, down at the dinner party. So that is positive. The big negative is that this money is being raised at a too high a valuation. So once the clever money comes in, which would be VC level or even sophisticated angel level, they're ending up with down rounds. And what's happening instead of that, because I've been on a few of these journeys to monitor it. You know, I've done a couple of investments through Crowdcube. I don't have a problem saying that because I want to see what the legal's like, the process and everything. The entrepreneurs realize they can't get any more money at all, and they give up. They don't go back to their the people, the angels, and say, what should we do about this? And maybe they do need a down round, maybe they need a bridge, maybe they need a convertible or something like that. The FCA are going to have, whatever they say about alternative funding, the FCA at some point must be quivering, wondering whether they should step in or not.
When you're assessing the merits of an investment, which comes first in your pecking order? Would it be the quality of the team or the quality of the plan?
Yeah, I mustn't hog this, but it's definitely the people, as I said earlier on. The plan, they need a plan. They need a plan to spend the money. You know, you're giving them some money which is going to last 12 to 18 months. You don't want them to run out. You know the plan will be wrong. You put warrants in there, you put shareholder agreements there. You know it's not going to go right. You know, but as angels, we're actually pretty nice to people. I mean, we don't fire founders in the way that VCs do. And apologies to any VCs in the room. But so yeah, you know the plan's wrong. But it needs to be there. Same as the exit slide. I believe, not all angels believe they should have an exit slide, but the long-term future should be there. But in the end, it's the people.
You're always looking at the management team and the commitment of that management team. If you have a quality within that, that is normally our first consideration. You do, though, have to look at the plan. You have to look at barriers to entry for the environment that they're in. So you paint the picture, but I think undoubtedly it's the quality of the people to begin with.
And I think these days, what we're finding with businesses, actually, you need the good old-fashioned stuff around connectivity and being able to get on trains to London and all that sort of stuff is really important. But actually, having somewhere that's got a good balance between, it's about having that network of people that you can tap into in your field. So if you're in Cambridge and you're into deep science, you're in the right place, aren't you? If you're into digital technology and marketing, Bournemouth's your place. So it's but do you know what I mean though? So it's about having that access to network, and the broader the network, the better really. And also I think, to give a little plug for Bournemouth, actually having somewhere that's actually got a bit of work-life balance and a bit of quality of life, however you define that. Whether that be access to great education for the kids, or access to a beach, or access to whatever floats your boat. I think that's increasingly important for entrepreneurs as well.
Well, it was very, very interesting for me. I also came from Bath 8 years ago, moved into the area, and I saw the potential here. And I thought it's just at this tipping point. But I could see that in terms of government funding, it wasn't going to come from there. It was going to come from collaboration and partnership with movers and shakers. So I thought, who do I need to start talking to? I've got X million, and I'm sure they've got something to give. And when I realised in terms of the planning of Silicon South, the people who are seeing the digital creative industries, I think Bournemouth and this area can replicate what Cambridge has done very successfully in terms of its research and its businesses. Bournemouth can do it here, and I know there are many people in this room who believe that, and I'm one of them, and I think actually my piece of the jigsaw just fits in to the rest of that and that momentum that is building. So I saw an opportunity when I had to go to the Board of Governors and say, right, this is a bit more ambitious than you were thinking. You told me to think big, but actually this fits, and the whole area can be ambitious, and I couldn't have tried that if I was in a village in the middle of nowhere.
I don't want this to be totally a Bournemouth ad, or a Dorset ad, by the way. So I've got to ask somebody who's not from Bournemouth as to why you set up in Farnborough and what.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. So we've moved our business, obviously aviation, into Farnborough. Farnborough Airport is one of the top business aviation airports in the UK. Your private aircraft are split off from commercial airliners like Heathrow and Gatwick. For us, it's a fantastic location. We're kind of in the heart of the ecosystem. It's a bit like aviation is a small industry, but it's a little bit like being in Silicon Valley, I guess, of the aviation industry here in the south. So, we've worked with partners, we've picked up new customers just by being in that location. We're able to look out on the airfield, see all the aircraft, see our customers using our products. So, it's been fantastic. I also just want to add also that as how we've set up the business, we've basically got the expertise, the industry knowledge, the sales and marketing here in the UK and in Europe, but we've moved our development over to the Ukraine, and we've been able to leverage an amazing development pool and talent that's out there. And I'd really like to see the UK able to offer the same level of talent coming out of universities, because it just simply isn't there, as I can see here in the UK at the moment.
Just while we're on that, Ukraine's an interesting choice given it's not in the EC, and it's been obviously questionable with Russia. How have you found relationships, political relationships there? Just very quick.
Yeah, it's what you read in the news and the reality on the ground are quite different. The people there are just like us. They have the same concerns, the same worries. Our development office is right on the west side of the Ukraine, about as far away from the troubles on the east as you possibly could be.
Just thought I'd have a comment on the grounds that every year we do an annual entrepreneurs survey, and that the main concerns are always about resource of people. So it is all about putting your business where the people will be, and the fact is that you need somewhere where that resource is coming through, which feeds into the schools and the universities. And to be fair, and I've been down in Bournemouth quite a long time now, you can see the change here, that there is a better skilled pool of people here. The fact is that's got to improve, and it's a continuing thing, and I'm sure Bill works towards that in what he does as well.
I just wanted to give a couple of quick overseas examples, if I can. There's been a lot in the news recently about China, and we're probably all aware that the massive urbanisation that's gone on in China has been in part to build up the business infrastructure, to put in place road, rail connections, and particularly to build up the cities. One of the criticisms of another huge country, which is India, is that they don't have enough infrastructure in place and they don't have the ability to conduct international business. I know clearly that's a very broad brush, but it is a criticism. But one thing, picking up on the question about Ukraine, I do think a lot of overseas investors that we see, they want to invest in places that have good corporate governance as well. And I think that's a very important fact. And I think that's a very positive thing for the UK in general, as we go into perhaps a questionable few years where we're thinking about things. We do have some very strong corporate governance levels here, which is very attractive to people.
We heard two speakers that it was extremely, for me, extremely inspiring, exciting to hear you talk about the opportunities from a pool of untapped talent. That's the creative side. Obviously, digital is succeeding extremely well, and it is very, very exciting here. But also the female pool of untapped talent. How does the panel feel or think it could take steps in Dorset to help access that untapped pool of talent?
Yes, I'm an imposter here. It's very interesting for me to come into this environment. I'm used to having women everywhere. So suddenly there's a dearth of women. It's rather bizarre. But I agree wholeheartedly with you. I've been to a few of these events now, and predominantly male in terms of the people there. Interestingly, the one that I did attend, 4 of the 5 pitchers were women. But every other investor was a man, and I was there as an imposter. It's my role, I am the imposter. But I think you have to, in terms of the networking, the business networks, there's fantastic talent out there, but you've got to go out to it and get it in and say, right, and develop those skills. It's interestingly, I've had to do a huge business plan. I've been subject to due diligence. I've done things I never thought I would have to do this year, 18 months to get that funding in. That was quite daunting for me, but I think that skill set, if you teach that skill set early on, then you can get people out there, because the ideas are there without a doubt.
Yeah, I mean, and obviously, first of all, just building on the women entrepreneur side, actually what you're doing is really the very right thing, which is getting in early with girls. And one of the things that's happening is that not enough women are coming forward to pitch. And it was quite interesting, you said you'd seen a lot here pitching, but actually if you look at the mix in a pitch normally, you'll see only 2 or 3 of those are women entrepreneurs. So they're not coming forward, they're not having the confidence and potential sense of their own skills and opportunity to actually pitch. So there's a big issue there about giving really strong skills to women to be able to, there are many of them incredibly innovative women who are not feeling that they can go forward and ask for money. There are also still a lot of issues for women actually not want to go forward for external finance, and that's another education issue, which is women feeling they're giving up control, feeling much closer to their business. If you're a creative woman, you often feel much closer to your business, much harder to give up. So again, you know, that's all part of an education and giving, and I've worked a lot, particularly with fashion and design, women in entrepreneurs as well. So we've got big work to do with women entrepreneurs. This next wave will be much better. The current wave, it's much tougher. Where obviously I sit at the moment, there's this issue about diversity in the investment base. And what we have is a huge pool of women who are exactly the same, successful women in the community who've got strong business skills out there doing all kinds of really exciting things, leaders in their field, but actually are not seeing that they could also be investing. And we are seeing a lot of barriers, both from the advisory community, as I mentioned earlier, about them not being given the advice and information about how to invest, but also actually there isn't a reflection of it enough in their own community because there aren't enough role models, there aren't enough case studies of successful women who are investing and, you know, doing it well and being able to feed that back. So obviously I'm looking to kind of see how we can cultivate people who are happy to stand up and tell their stories about their own experiences of investing and how women can do it and women do it successfully. We need to create an environment in which women can come together and share experience in a forum. But also we actually need to educate and change the mix in angel groups. And I'm very pleased to hear that Peter says he's now got 3 women in Cambridge Angels, which is a start against 80 men, I think. But you can see how that is a challenge for a woman to walk into that group and try and actually participate. We are not suggesting you set up all female angel groups. I think that's a matter of choice, but I'm not actually. What we do need to do is create absolute diversity. You've got a mix of opinions, ideas to stand up in front and pitch, and those mixed opinions then end up on your board as an entrepreneur, and that's very valuable too.
And I can certainly say, having run and sat on boards of mainly high-tech businesses, many boards, and the vast majority of them are all male, when there are women on the board, it makes a huge difference to us, the behaviour, frankly, of us men. And that's it is true, and I hate to say it, but it makes a huge positive impact to have women on the boards. I'm going to ask the 2 professionals here about their view. No, don't have to go into your client specifics, but what's your view of women that you see in your respective roles as clients of yours in terms of how you support them and what attitude, well, not necessarily attitude you've got to them, but how do you support them as women separately or differently to men, or are they the same, etc.? Nick first, then Snow.
Of course, any portfolio contains a number of women entrepreneurs. Actually, one of my largest clients owns a major chain businesses down here, and she expands that business regularly and is going for another acquisition recently. But generally speaking, it is difficult to see. There is quite often that situation where you're inviting someone to a dinner or something like that, and it is the 7 or 8 blokes around the table and this one lady. So you do try and make some effort to expand that and to make sure that we are being much more inclusive in what we're doing and being conscious of those issues. The fact is, though, that most of the women we deal with are strong enough not to really let it faze them too much, because they've got to that position. Perhaps it's a bit too much of a battle to have got there, but by the time they got there, they're very confident and they can take on everyone and to be honest, are leading the community in some ways.
I suppose answering it in two ways, really. Certainly from Investec's point of view, we are quite fortunate to have a number of senior directors and heads of our offices, heads of regions who are female. And I think that's hugely important. I don't think the financial services industry in general has covered itself in too much glory over the last 20 or 30 years with women in it. But I do think it's changing, and that can only be a good thing. Certainly as far as clients are concerned, we do have a large number of female entrepreneurs, and I think any firm like mine that doesn't recognise the sort of growing influence of women in business controlling huge sums of money are going to do themselves a disservice over the next 20 or 30 years, because it's happened.
So Justin, on one of your slides, you said that there was a way to increase liquidity. And I'd like to know what that is. And then, rather than the microphone coming back to me, Jenny's question is, and what I'd like to know is, have you got any experience or knowledge of improving liquidity, whether that be angels selling their stakes to other angels or to other angel groups? So that's my second part.
I mean, basically, if you're investing your money in there, you can ask, you might not get it, any series of, staging posts at which you may ask the other shareholders to buy back your shares. The key, of course, is at what value. Because, somebody might say, listen, we want the money right now, that's fine, it's going to help us along the way, but the liquidity event that usually defines a value is where the business is taken to market. So the market will value the business. So, everybody knows what the value of the shares are. The problem is, if you want to sell your shares before the business is taken to market, then the question is, how do you go about valuing your shares in the business? And there's two ways you can do it. I mean, number one is you just have a mechanism by which you agree a number up front. You say, I'll invest at 1 times, and in 3 years' time, there's an option, a call option, to get your money back at 1.5 times or 2 times. The company may or may not agree to that, but the point being, it's a negotiation. And of course, the second point being, can the business actually afford to buy it, whether it be other shareholders? But the point being is that you can actually put those call options in. The second one, of course, is if you can't agree a value on it, you just say you have it independently valued. It's a minefield in my view, because when businesses are valued independently, so any of your companies that you invest in, if you haven't got what I call a liquidity event, which is an outside investor valuing the business, and you take it to an accounting firm and say, listen, we have this business we've invested in it, we've put 100 grand in, it's turning over a couple of $100 grand a year, it's not making any money, we want to get our shares out, how much is it worth? Right, so the accounting firm says, listen, it's not worth anything. It might be worth an awful lot of money. But, what I would say is that it is definitely worth creating or discussing call options, about how potentially to redeem your shares, whether it be a company buyback of those shares, which is one option, or of course is one of the other shareholders or an external shareholder buying the shares, because basically that's trying to protect the downside. I'm not going to pretend that it succeeds in every different investment, but where I counsel my clients and where I put investments in, then I want to know how am I going to get the money out if it's not going to be a final exit.
Just before I pass this on to Jenny, and this is going to have to be our last question because we are slightly over time, I just want to say, in my experience, the more you make these sort of options and things are all possible, everything's possible within the legal contracts, the more complicated it gets, the more the legal bills are, and sometimes that dwarfs the investment. And therefore, my view is, if it's small, keep it simple. And that cannot go, you must keep it simple. So while these are all options, they're all negotiable, they can make things very complicated and very expensive and time-consuming. Jenny.
Yes, and obviously just the two parts. There are really two main things that are happening in the market. One is obviously that we are trying to encourage more VCs and bigger funds to be angel friendly. In other words, at the point when you're actually going to pass on the baton to Series A, Series B funds, then what we're really looking for is for them to start really working with the angels to offer you liquidity at that moment. The more we can get funds to recognise that opportunity and to have good terms in so doing, then obviously that's already a start, partial liquidity. The second thing that's really coming through the market now is a secondary market, which is actually, we've got platforms, we've got actual funds being set up as actual, buyers of shares, buyers of angel shares. I mean, those secondary markets are getting quite well established now, and there are at least 3 or 4 now in the UK. I cannot comment because obviously the whole issue is all about, the valuations, etc. So it's, whether these are going to be fair, but these are obviously solutions. We are not going to solve the problem of the lack of trade sales easily in this country. So we have to have these interim measures. And I think the most important thing is going to be those opportunities for at least partial liquidity that next stage finance brings. I think for most people, if we can get at least some of our money back and start recycling it, then we know that's better than nothing. But I totally agree with you. It's a massive issue, which is people get completely invested up. And that's why we need this constantly new pool of investment coming into the market. But some great players are getting invested up, and that's a sad thing. So any further ideas, I mean, they're very welcome, because obviously I will take those to the market, and we're working very closely with BVCA, and the government as well. But I don't think the market's going to easily solve its own problems on this one.
I've been persuaded to take one very short last question before we say goodbye.
Thank you. I'm Sally Thompson, founder and CEO of startup business Launch International, and I'd like to ask the panel, what do you consider to be the wow factor elements when companies are making a pitch, if you had to choose one above the rest?
I'll go to Peter first on this.
Yes, funny enough, I was on live BBC radio about 4 weeks ago, and I was asked a similar question. It's worded slightly differently. What's the best pitch you've ever seen? I'd never been asked that before. And I just rabbited on, much to my incredible embarrassment to thousands of people listening. So it's confidence, of course. It's knowing your content. It's, if there's a Q&A, knowing when you know your answers, and when you don't know the answers, not to bullshit, basically, to actually say, I don't know, I'll tell you later. So to some extent, it's dress, it's poise, it's chemistry, isn't it? There's so much gut in that initial contact with somebody, and you've got to get past that. The entrepreneur's got to get past that. I see lots of these things. Many angels see lots. You need to get on to the next meeting or the next email, the next something. And this, whether it's 1 minute you've got or half an hour, there's a number of little factors that makes all the difference. And so I can't say exactly a main priority, but it's a number of things that just, and being, confidence, not being nervous, a number of things which are actually quite difficult. I've just done a podcast with one of my portfolio, and he said he was so nervous. He had the first time he pitched, he only had 3 things to say, and he needed a piece of paper with those 3 things on because he was so nervous. And now he's, if you listen to the podcast, extremely confident.
I'm just going to say, just in quick answer, the things you mustn't do is don't give us a definitions list to start with. Don't mess up your financials, and be confident and know your audience. Because we've had that at Dorset Business Angels in the last few presentations. Somebody who stood up and started giving us a whole list of definitions, and you're thinking, where is this going? Somebody who couldn't answer their financials. Like Dragon's Den, you're dead in the water. You have to know your audience and pitch it right. And that's what gives the wow factor, is avoiding those pitfalls and getting it really pitched right, pitched succinctly, know your product, know your market, and know who you're talking to. I'm going to, yes, of course, Justin.
I would just like to add something a little bit to that question that came forward about, the best pitch. And what I would say from my side, sitting in a number of them, there is a fine line between enthusiasm, confidence, and I don't know why I'm thinking about the advice I was given about trying to find a wife and not to try to be too needy. So there's a story behind that, but I did eventually get married. But I would say that I'm still married. But there is certainly the ones that I find a little bit off-putting, and is often is if the person doing the pitch or the team giving the pitch is overly needy. There's a certain, I don't know, the right word is insouciance. I guess a certain degree, if you're really confident about what you have, like Peter's saying, being on top of the numbers, you know, to be confident, but also not to be too needy, because that can actually be quite off-putting. You know, if you as an investor are sat there thinking, well, actually, it really does look quite good, you're going to know it. And, you know, if there's a little bit withheld, that adds a degree of allure. I'm sorry, it's a bit, you know, subjective what I'm saying, but you know, don't be overly needy. That's all I would say.
Okay, can I say thank you to the panel? Just a big round of applause. Fantastic. Thank you very much indeed.